Today we're going to be drawing pool fun in the sun. Just getting ready for summertime activities and being outside in the sun and the fresh air around the water, probably the safest and some of the healthiest things you can do for yourself. So let's get started. Here's a finished example with a lot of line work and a little bit of color and shading. You can do both. Line work alone, line work with shading, or if you prefer, just shading. Here we have an inner tube with stripes that wrap around the tube, a swimmer jumping from the water in the foreground, right, another swimmer just coming off of the diving board here in the upper right, the sun shining, making everything warm and bright, and the end of a water slide over here on the left. You see different horizontal lines moving left to right, and that creates the texture of the water. Let's get started. Remembering that you do need to practice your basic marks, your ovals and circles and straight line parallels, and don't forget to get down into the nitty-gritty of hatching and cross-hatching. You can play with the weight of your line, thick or medium or thin, and you can play with how many lines go one on top of another to make an area denser and darker, as if there is more shadow. Later, we are going to learn a new line, an S-curve. We just won't use it right now. You can see in my drawing for today that I've done quite a bit of underdrawing. I do it with my pencil. Sometimes it's very light and loose. But here in this area where you see a diver entering the water somersaulting backwards, and I'm showing the bottoms of his feet and trunks and the foreshortening of his legs, that was a little tricky. And any area of your drawing that you think presents a special challenge, you may have to spend more time with. Remembering that if you nail it, if you get it right, the viewer, your audience, will be very appreciative of your efforts and admiring of your skills. Since I have my underdrawing done in pencil, let me go ahead and begin to do my final work in marker. Again, if you'd prefer not to use marker, that is fine. I'm going to start here in the lower foreground with a wave-like line that goes clear across from right to left, from left to right. And that wave-like line, that wave, will be in front of other things. You can see it's going to cover a portion of this swimmer's hand, her lower half of her body, and some of the beach ball. So working from lower to higher, I'll just make sure that I will work from front to back. And as I move up the page, the things that appear will be behind the things beneath them. Here I have my beach ball, partially covered by this lower wave. And the beach ball is made of plastic panels of different colors. And as the panels appear on the ball, when the ball is fully inflated, the panels have a curve that appear to wrap around the ball. This is a great simple example of contour, where you have a line that wraps around the form. Later, color or line work to give it extra dimension. Here, in this girl's right hand, I have her catching a frisbee. So I'm going to go ahead and use her thumb to cover a portion of the frisbee. It looks like her pointer finger has a little bit of it. I see lines of motion as the frisbee enters her hand. I see her wrist going up into her shoulder. There. Later, well, maybe now, I'll add just a little bit of line work to suggest that inside shaded edge of the Frisbee. Let's get going with the rest of her. Her bathing suit wraps around her neck the way an apron wraps around your neck, covers her body, her neck being here. Let's bring her face down to meet her neck. Simple nose, hair, bangs, and let's go ahead and do this other arm, bent. Remember, thumb to the inside, waving at friends, maybe waving at you, who are also in the picture. That's your viewpoint. You're a swimmer too. We'll get more details on her later on. Moving up and back, as we talked about before, I see another line here that's suggestive of a wave. And I'm only going to draw that much of the line that I can see coming from behind these objects in front, from behind the beach ball and coming in back of the swimmer. Okay, working still. The waters are getting a little rough and choppy the closer we get to the diver. There may be some drops of water coming off the surface. It is so agitated. Remember, you can use different lines to represent the energy in the water. It looks like I have one final line back here that's very energetic, as if something just fell into the water. I'm going to be very careful around this diver over here because I don't want to interfere with any of that careful planning that I did earlier. I'm going to go ahead and put his diving board here. Do you see how it's a parallelogram, angled? If you notice, this arrow right there, doesn't that look an awful lot like what we've done before? The top and bottom of the board here on the far left are parallel. These vertical corners are parallel. That's a good relationship to remember. And the top and bottom of the board here on the right side, also parallel. I have one more line to complete the board, and there it is going outside the picture. We just have to imagine what the rest of the board looks like. Now let's get busy with this diver. I'm going to use a lighter line. I'm not going to press as hard with my marker. One foot can be a little bigger than the other, seeing as it might be a little closer. I am severely foreshortening the legs. You see how short the calf looks there, and there how much is shortened and how much is hidden behind the foot? Foreshortening is a great way to to imply that you see things at a very funny angle. This is going to be my sun. You've got to have a sun. You've got to have waves. You've got to have swimmers. You're one of those swimmers too. And now over here on this far, far left, we're going to put the end of a water slide. So watch how this happens. The water slide curves, comes to an end, and curves again. So this is one of those protective panels on the side of the slide that keep you from falling off. And water will come down its middle. Here I have another curve. Notice how similar these two are, connected by that angle line. We won't put a line here because this has to be open. I'll go ahead and indicate some water coming off the slide. And now we get to do a little bit of additional line work to make this more complete. I could start with my sun, and I'm going to use a trailing line coming in. Trailing means it gets gradually smaller and comes to a point. The weight trails. It trails off. I'm going to use some hatching lines right here on the underside of the board to indicate shadow. Makes sense. I'm going to use hatching lines here going up and down to indicate shadow. These might be placed a little more closely together so the appearance is of greater depth or greater shadow. I will leave this front edge facing the light source bright. Over here, more of the same. You notice how careful I am with every start and every stop. How can I do this so well? Practice, like you know to do. I may go ahead and add some very light line work and indicating some shine or shimmer or just a difference in density of the water as it sheets off the slide. I might come down here, since these panels on the ball are of different colors, and add some line work, some hatching here. This value, this color, might be darker than the one next to it. As a matter of fact, some of these panels may be pure white. Notice how I adjust the angle of my mark to kind of appear to wrap around. If this panel is white, let me add another one back here. Make it colored. Make this one colored. And it looks like we're good. This end here, I'm just going to make it dark. Maybe leave a little shine on there from the sun. Let's go down here and add some shadow. You never have to do much, but what you do should be carefully done. Let's activate that surface with more line. Trailing lines here. Let's drop a little shade across the lower left side of her body as we see it, her lower right, our lower left. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of line work here, suggestive of shadow there. Maybe a shadow underneath. Here, let's see some of her individual hairs coming off her head. Maybe a little shadow there, there. Where else? Well, let's just move on up. Here, let's go ahead and do a little shading on his trunks, maybe a little on his feet. Let me bring that trunk all the way over. Let me do a little bit, very lightly on the sun. I think I'll darken the sun in. Give him one tooth there in his mouth, is what I should say. I like to play with different weights of line, so I'm going to add a lighter and longer line here, lightly weighted. That provides a nice contrast with the shorter, more heavily weighted line. And finally, I might go ahead and do a little more line work in some of these waves, just so that we can accentuate their movement and give some sense of color and value throughout the water. Remember, you can always use colored pencils if you like. Because this back wave, this backmost wave, is very energetic. Let me throw some drops of water coming off that. And there you have it. This is your fun in the pool in the summertime. Not an easy one, demanding of many of your skills. But now, you try.